Hey everybody, Steven here. A season 3, episode 39, Green Effect podcast on the air. Let's go. So I was off last week. Sorry again. I know some of you will be heartbroken over that, but I'm back. I was away for a weekend in Minneapolis, watched my Golden Gophers win and lose. But took it in the game. Haven't been there since like 2019. Yeah, since before COVID. So it was nice to kind of get back down there. I won't lie, I was expecting it to be a little bit more rough after all the riots and stuff, but you know what? It's a beautiful city, and I'm really fortunate that it still looks good. Obviously, they've either cleaned it up or the areas I was in weren't really impacted. Anyway, this episode is a super special one, okay? Something I have never done before. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through the usual updates, okay? A lot of people love this podcast. There's a lot of really good updates that come right off the bat. But I am totally going to steal something out of someone else's book. Okay. Russell Matthews. He is a great YouTube host. If you have a moment, definitely search him. Okay. I'm just stealing a page out of his book. And what Russell did was he actually did a side by side video. Okay. On a YouTube video that was put out called Housing Hell, how we got here and how we get out. All right. Now, Pierre Pollevre is actually the one that put this out. But the only reason why I'm actually going to go through this on video with everybody is it's very, yeah, we got a couple of Justin Trudeau talking heads, but it's really not that political. It's just stating some very simple facts. And so I want to go through the news, and then I want to pop into that session where we really go side by side. So if you've never watched the podcast on YouTube before, please pop over, have a look for that session. It's all going to be part of this podcast. For the people who are listening, I'm going to be playing the video from the YouTube video. The audio from the YouTube video, so you can hear it. But if you get a chance, pop over to YouTube, my YouTube station, and take a gander. It's actually going to be pretty cool. Okay. And thank you to Russell for the idea. Remember, check him out on YouTube if you get a chance. All right. So let's start with the news because there was a shit ton of stuff that happened last week. Where do I begin? Actually, before I even get into last week, we've got the Bank of Canada announcement coming up. Wednesday, December the 6th, I believe it is. I might be wrong, but it's coming up this week. It might be the 7th. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But it's this week. Okay. Now, everybody knows that I think there's one more rate increase coming. Will it be this week? I don't think so. All right. I have been saying there's one more coming. Might be in January. Okay. Everyone's saying, hell no, he's not going to. But I don't know. I think he's got to go one more time. As someone described the economy right now in Canada, it's like it's been given its medicine with these rate increases, and now we got to let the medicine try to actually work. Having said that, I think he's got to go one more time, make sure he can just like kibosh this thing, put it to bed, knock inflation down one more time. He's still not he's within his acceptable outlook for now with inflation, but he's not there yet. I think we got one more coming, guys. Maybe this week, hopefully not, but I wouldn't put it past him. So you heard it here first. I still think there's one more coming. I hope I'm completely wrong. I just don't see one. I just don't see us not going with one more. But we'll definitely see what happens. Because honestly, like inflation is down, right? It's totally down. We've had, I think, 5 straight decreases, 5 straight quarterly decreases in GDP. So are we in a recession? Folks, we've been in a recession for months now, okay? It is what it is. We know what's going on in the economy. Uh, Sales are slowing. Customer sentiment is slowing. I've talked about all of these stats. I know builders aren't building. And talking to builders that I know, most of them are not building, right? There's definitely your niche ones, 2, 3, 4, 5 more, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses, different custom builders. It's all good. But by and large, builders are, I don't want to say not building, but they're like grinding to a halt almost. They're still doing some stuff, but not a lot, right? Immigration's record high. Do I have to keep going with this list of reasons? Okay. Anyway, that's what I think is coming up this week with Bank of Canada. Moving on. Okay, so the big banks, they announced two things have happened with the big banks in the last week. And listen, I've said this before. I'm gonna say it again. Yeah, everyone's all like pissy about our banks. They make lots of money, and the CEOs make billions, and they absolutely do. Is it right? I'm not here to say that. Who the hell knows anymore? But our banks are pretty freaking solid. All right, our banks are not hurting for money. They're not going to go bankrupt or insolvent anytime soon. They're very, very healthy. Worldwide, the banks are healthy in Canada. Okay. During COVID and before it, banks were hiring non-stop. I remember working for RBC. Everyone knows I worked there for many years. Okay. I remember we couldn't keep up. Like, I mean, we didn't have enough staff in mortgage lending, investment lending, branches. They hired a lot of people. And remember, Dave Mackay came out sometime this year, I can't remember when it was, and said, we overhired. RBC already went through their massive layoffs, like 3,000 people, I think. Anyway, there's more layoffs coming. Okay, and they've already happened. TD had massive ones. Scotia, I believe, has either happened, it's already happened already, or it's coming. Okay. CIBC, it's just a matter of time. There's just too many people working here. Okay. And they got to offset jobs and loan loss provisions. So that kind of gives me a nice segue into the bank's quarterly earnings statements. A lot of them are still making money. Like, there's still revenue, there's still profit to be had, obviously. Okay. We're not sinking, the banks are not sinking ships. However, they have increased what we call loan loss provisions. Okay, let me explain this. So basically, they say, look, based on what we're seeing from our stats, and guys, they got analysts working for banks that make a lot of friggin' money. Okay, they are very smart people. Okay, they went to Harvard probably, or Yale, or I don't know, some sort of, or Queens or U of T. Like, they're all pretty smart people. So they should be able to see the forward guidance. Now, one would argue, if they were so damn smart, how did they let this happen? But that's a whole other podcast and conversation, okay? So what they're basically saying is, look, we got to increase how many bad loans we think are going to float through our company, okay? Now, during COVID, listen, there were like no loan loss provisions in some cases. So like, nothing's going wrong here, right? Refinance people, no big deal, low rates, call it a day, life is good, okay? Just because they're increasing their loan loss provisions, don't be jumping off any bridges right now, okay? Not unusual. Now, Scotia, and I'm sorry, I don't have the stat in front of me right this second. I should, but let me just see if I've got it. I apologize, I have it right here. Scotia has actually come out and said they are expecting almost $1.3 billion, B with a billion with a B, to cover bad loans. All the other banks are like half of that. I think where Scotia is probably even more impacted than the other banks is they have adjustable rate mortgages. Okay, so does National Bank, but let's face it, they're number 6. They are not a huge player. Scotiabank, on the other hand, huge in the broker channel. Okay, I think that's the main reason why their loan loss provisions are a lot higher. Okay, guys, again, don't jump off any bridges anytime soon. Okay, we got to get caught up with some of these loan losses anyway. It's been going well for too long, and I will say this: I don't think it's going to be that bad. Canadians are exceptionally good at paying their mortgage. On top of that, don't forget, I've said this before, and I put this on social media, we have a lot of savings. Canadians are very good at saving money, okay? They will float the boat. My concern is not necessarily the mortgages, but it's all these damn unsecured line of credits and credit cards we've given to people, just based on credit score, not income, nothing like that. So, their loan loss provisions include that as well. And I was reading about that today, where some people are saying, guys, don't worry about the mortgages. At least they're secured against an asset. We'd be more worried about unsecured lines, credit cards, etc. Not unreasonable, makes complete sense. Okay. So don't panic. Yes, there's loan loss provisions. They are also going to be offsetting some of those loan loss provisions with job layoffs. Okay, guys, people are expensive, right? For a bank to hold people, it is expensive. Remember that. So, quick and dirty, to save money, you cut people, thousands of them, right? So, we're probably going to see that more and more where the banks are going to be letting people go to try to offset their losses. As I said before, switching gears a little bit, Canada's economy has shrunk again. All right, five quarters in a row. No huge surprise here. It is what it is. The other thing I'm noticing too, you know, students are a hot button topic right now. With students, especially international students who are basically paying the way for many colleges and universities because their tuition's so high, they are on the hot seat right now because I don't know if you guys heard about this what do you call it? The food bank in Brampton that basically said if you're an international student, you're not welcome here. All right. I know, very un-Canadian. I get it. But when you drill down a little bit, if universities, international students are showing up for food at a food bank, they're not really supposed to need anything when they're here. They're supposed to be here and completely support themselves. So I'm not saying good, bad, or otherwise. What I am saying is I think people are starting to fight back a little bit, right? And, with the way immigration is going, which again, I've said this before, we need immigration. I'm not even questioning that. People are getting super frustrated. I was reading a couple of articles about people are, for the first time, just not liking immigration, period. Like, so un-Canadian of us, right? And I get it. I get it. I am a grandchild of immigrants, guys. I get it. But I think our federal government has kind of put us in this kind of thought process. Why are we sharing with new Canadians? Like, it doesn't. It's so un-Canadian, but in the same breath, it's so like stressful. And it's like, okay, if we're short certain fields, can we allow immigration within those fields and maybe not necessarily other fields? You know what I mean? So I don't know. I honestly, I get it. 100% I get it. It just makes me feel kind of creepy because I think immigration's important. But anyway, more to come on that. I mean, like I said, the students are like super, super on the hot seat right now. All right. All right. Anyway, that's a quick update as what's been going on. Banks not making as much money, loan loss provisions, job losses, Scotiabank doing their thing with loan loss provisions, whatever. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I want to jump in and do this housing hell video with everybody. Okay. Again, fascinating stuff. All right. So I'm just going to make a quick tech change here. You'll probably see a kind of a flip in the video, and we'll get that going. Hey everybody, okay, let's get rolling with this video. As I said, it's a little bit political, but it's not. There's some pretty crazy stats in here about the housing market and what's gone on, and I just find it fascinating. Okay, so let's just play this. You're going to hear the video, you're going to hear the audio. I'm going to pause it here and there just to speak to some of the points. And hey, let's get going.
Something new and strange has happened
so a little
in Canada.
political to start. I know, again, you're going to see some JT talking heads, but after that, here we go.
Canada is sitting on probably one of the largest housing bubbles of all times.
Something we haven't seen before. An entire generation of youth now say they will never be able to afford a home. This is not normal for Canada.
We've got students who are living in their vehicles because they couldn't find a place to live.
Tens of thousands of Canadians could default, Moshe, on their mortgages. And are we looking at that kind of nightmare scenario?
After generations of affordable and stable Canadian home prices, it now takes 66% of the average monthly income to make payments on the average single-detached Canadian.
66%, I mean, he's not far off, right? Especially in the major urban centers. And I've said this to my clients over and over and over again. Income has not kept up with the price of housing. We all know that. So,
Canadian house. Given that most of the remaining 34% of the family paycheck is taken up by taxes, there's literally nothing left for food and recreation. And that all assumes that you have enough for a down payment to get the mortgage in the first place. Saving up for that down payment in Toronto now takes an average of 25 years. Not long ago, you paid off a mortgage in that time.
He's not
So
wrong
young people-
again, right? And I think I see this with my clients as well. It's tough to save. When you're spending so much money on your day-to-day life, again, not political, he's just stating some facts here, right? And he's not wrong.
People must rent, but rent has doubled in the last 8 years. Newlyweds now pay $1,000 per month to rent a single room in a townhouse that they share with 2 other couples. 35-year-olds live in their parents' basements. Rents are so high in Toronto that students live in homeless shelters. Others sleep in their cars or even under bridges just to afford to go to university. One grandmother posted signs on hydro poles trying to find a place to live. Middle-class people like nurses and carpenters now live in their vehicles. Tent cities are popping up in almost every major city and many small towns in Canada, mostly in places that never had them before. And because homeless shelters are overflowing with people, new refugees are now told to live on the streets and under bridges.
This tent city issue, as you guys know, I'm in Kitchener-Waterloo. It's an issue, right? And I think it's funny. We drive by it, and my wife and I, we don't even know what to say. You know, it's like they've become these true parts of our society where they just have nowhere else to go. Like, we don't have the social programs. I've never seen this before. I'm in Kitchener-Waterloo. I'm sure it's worse elsewhere, like the one picture that just flashed up there. So, again, I get it.
Like all countries, we've always had problems. Throughout Canada's past, though, almost anyone who got a job could save up and buy a home by their mid-20s. When did all that change? About 8 years
Here's the
ago.
political part, right?
It's crazy to think, but in a little under a decade, Canada's housing costs have basically doubled. The rent has doubled. Mortgage payments doubled. The needed down payment on an average home doubled.
He's not wrong. I don't know what to say. Like, yeah, I know. Obviously, if it's the leader of, the official opposition doing a video about the prime minister and his government, okay, it's political. I get it, but this is not wrong. Like, these are just numbers. He's not making stuff up here, right? And I'm sure there's another side to the story. I get it. But we're talking housing. This is it, man. These are the numbers right here. Yeah, stuff has doubled 100%.
Double trouble. Think about that. Housing costs have gone up more since 2015 than they had in all the years before that combined. 8 years ago, the average one-bedroom rent was about $970. The average today, $1,871. The average needed down payment, about $23,000. Today, $51,000. 8 years ago, the average mortgage payment was about $1,400. Now, it's over $3,500. 8 years ago, payments on an average single detached home cost roughly 40% of median family income. Now, that number is 60%.
So he's bringing this number back again. And here's another Trudeau talking head, or he's not talking, but a bouncing head or whatever. But he's not wrong. Again, he's just stating facts, folks. Again, no matter who you're voting for, whatever, here's the numbers. And I've lived through this. He's completely correct.
Meaning that paychecks have not
He stole
caught
that
up
from me.
with the cost of housing. And we can't blame the rest of the world. Canada's housing costs have risen faster and higher than almost any other country on earth. Depending on how and when you measure it, Canada's housing costs are on average 45 to 75% higher than in the United States. In border towns, it's even more. Homes on the Canadian side are often 100% more expensive than their American counterparts.
I like this and I don't like this. Okay. you're going to see in a second. I showed my wife, who's not in to the real estate market, and she is, but she's not. She just listens to me all day long. But um, is it fair to compare Niagara Falls, Ontario, to Niagara Falls, U.S.? Man, if I lived in if I worked in Niagara Falls, Canada, I just pop across and buy a freaking house in the U.S., right? So he's going to talk about the comparison. And listen, the U.S. economy is just different than our economy. Let's not kid ourselves, okay? A lot of the Americans are still, drunk off their 30-year mortgage that they locked into. It's only the new people that are going to get screwed by that. But it's hard to look at these numbers and kind of stomach it a little bit. I would love to fact check a little bit about the average numbers, but I can't imagine they're that far off. So we'll keep going here.
Look at this home in Niagara, Canada versus this home in Niagara, New York. Only about a half an hour apart from one another. Vancouver's now the third and Toronto the 10th most unaffordable city on earth, worse than New York, London, England, and even Singapore, a wealthy island with 2,000 times more people per square kilometer than Canada. All these places have more money and people and less land, yet they are more affordable. UBS, a major global bank, now lists Toronto as having the riskiest housing bubble in the world, with Vancouver sixth. According to UBS, home prices in Toronto and Vancouver have gone from fair valued to overvalued.
For the people who are listening and not watching, just similar to when he was talking about the percentage of income that goes towards housing at 66% compared to 40 in 2015. The chart that's up on the screen right now basically has Trudeau's head bouncing back and forth on the year he was elected. That is what makes us a little bit political, but not wrong. That's all I'm saying.
All in only 10 years. This 2-bedroom property in Toronto's Kensington neighborhood costs the same
the one
as
thing
a
I like
20-bedroom castle.
Okay, and this is where, some stuff comes into this, but so they're comparing a house in Toronto that is like, it's a bungalow, it's white with a ton of graffiti on it, and then they're going to compare it to a Scottish castle, and they're the same price.
As a 20-bedroom castle situated on 5 acres of land in Scotland. This shouldn't be a problem in Canada based on our supply-demand dynamics. Think about it. With our massive geography, meaning lots of supply, and our small population, meaning limited demand, housing should be cheap here in Canada. We have the most land per person of any G7 country. That includes much land close to big cities where people need to live to work. So why is it so expensive? Well, let's break it down. A mortgage payment has 2 parts, interest and principal. Interest rates are set by the Bank of Canada, but heavily influenced by the federal government.
You'll forgive me if I don't think about monetary policy.
So this is where it goes a little bit sideways briefly. Okay. I remember the Bank of Canada and the federal government are separate entities. Okay. It is the job of the federal government to worry about one policy, Bank of Canada to worry about another. They're not supposed to be talking. I've joked about this on the podcast. Surely to God, JT and Tiffy Boy talk once in a while, right? But I'm this next part. I influenced. Is he wrong? Probably. Does it happen? Probably. I'm pretty sure they run into each other in the men's bathroom at the urinals. Like, come on, right? Anyway, let's keep going.
When the government borrows and spends, it bids up the goods we buy and the interest we pay. The Trudeau government has doubled Canada's debt, adding more debt than all prime ministers combined. Our finance minister has conceded that this deficit spending pours fuel on the inflationary fire.
And I'm going to start with what we shouldn't do. I think that it is very important not to make the problem worse. I am very mindful of the importance of not pouring fiscal fuel on the flames of inflation.
And then, a few weeks later, she poured $69 billion of new fuel on that fire.
Okay, again, not wrong, right? And so I'm watching this with my wife, okay? And basically, again, people who are listening, not watching, Disney Plus lady, otherwise known as Christia Freeland, okay, was at a press conference and said the federal government shouldn't make the inflation issue worse by basically spending more money. But then she goes ahead and drops like $67 billion in new spending, okay? I get it. This is the problem. Our federal government is so entrenched in spending damn money they don't have. Here we are, right? It's when you inject, as he said, when you inject money into the economy, whether it's the spending he's talking about, extra GST, the carbon tax refund that people get, that's just printing money, guys. That's all that is. The more money that's injected, the worse you're going to make inflation, because don't forget, inflation increases when people have money to spend, but there's not enough supply. The more money you inject, like we did during COVID, the less supply you're going to have because more people will be buying stuff, right? Anyway, moving on.
For governments to run huge deficits or borrow money,
okay,
they sell bonds.
Listen to this next part. This is how the bond fiasco has been going on. So if you're listening, listen closely to this next section. If you are watching, watch the pretty pictures. I'm just going to rewind it a little bit here. Oh, there's Disney Plus lady again. Here we go.
She poured $69 billion of new fuel on that fire. For governments to run huge deficits or borrow money, they sell bonds to investors. In recent years, the Trudeau government's spending has exploded, and they've been borrowing more than lenders will lend. So the Bank of Canada has started creating the cash. The money supply has therefore grown 8 times faster than the economy over the last 3 years. More money bidding on fewer goods, including fewer houses, equals.
Does everybody understand that? Okay, more money, less goods. Inflation.
But the central bank doesn't just send a Brinks truck to the Prime Minister's office. Rather, they use a complicated set of transactions that they call quantitative easing. Always be suspicious when you hear a complicated word that makes no sense to anyone except those benefiting from it. Here's how it goes. First, the government sells bonds to financial institutions. Then, the Bank of Canada buys those bonds right back at higher prices. Financial corporations love it because they're guaranteed a big profit. But the consequence is not only that the government gets more easy money to spend, but the financial system overflows with cash, which often is lent out at ultra low rates in super large mortgages, particularly for wealthy investors whose banking connections get them to the front of the line. So as you can see in this chart from the Bank of Canada itself, investors doubled the number of home purchases they made in just over a year.
Let's just address this point, because this is where things start to go a little sideways temporarily with this. Yes, let's face it, there was an investor boom, right? During COVID, cheap money, everything cash flowed. People had savings because they were locked down for 6-7 months. House prices went up. People refinanced, stole from Peter to pay Paul, purchased investment properties. Okay? Now, this is where I kind of debate things, and I'd love to hear what you have to think. Yes, real estate investors, everyone's against them. They shouldn't be doing it. But who would you rather see grow their net worth, grow their savings, their assets, so that they can prosper a little bit more? The middle class buying a couple of rental properties, like 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows? Or huge corporations coming in, swooping in. I remember, I think up in Sudbury at one point, some company came in and bought 30 of them or 50 or something like that. Who would you rather see succeed, major corporations or a ma and pa type setup? I don't know if there's a right answer there. There's pros and cons to both. But this is where he's going with this point right now is investors bought all these homes, now there's nowhere to live. Well, okay, which would be a fair argument if rental prices stayed down. They're up. We're low on supply on rentals as well. So we can't have this both ways, right?
The black line, well, it shows when the quantitative easing began. Cause, money printing. Effect, housing inflation. So the government deficits forced the Bank of Canada to boost interest rates to push inflation back down. Former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley put it this way.
It appears that fiscal and monetary policy are not aligned. And the importance of that alignment is key. We're still running very large fiscal deficits. The government still talks about how much they're going to continue to spend. And this is a bit like driving your car with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake.
Common sense solution, stop the inflationary deficits so the bank doesn't have to raise the rates. That means cutting government waste and capping government spending.
I don't know if you saw that there, for people who are not watching the video. He does slip in some political stuff there. It's funny, now this is the fourth time I've watched this. I can see it. But the one thing he slipped in there, I'm just going to pause it when I see it. Oh, I missed it.
That means cutting
this little balance sheet he's got here.
That means cutting government.
I know this is going to be like annoying people listening, but I'm just. Oh, here we go. So this frame right here, Canadian Broadcast Corporation. He's already come out and said, look, if you guys can't float your own boat, we shouldn't be funding. The taxpayers should not be funding the CBC. All right. Do I agree with that? That's very un-Canadian. I get it, but anyway, I'm just throwing it out there. He threw in the CBC as part of the expense. So I just found that kind of interesting.
Government spending with a dollar-for-dollar law that forces politicians to find $1 of savings for each new dollar of spending. By getting back towards a balanced budget, we'll bring down inflation and interest rates.
Okay, so one thing I'm seeing here, just keep this in mind. Lower mortgage costs, lower interest rate, less government stimulus, lower inflation. I'm not seeing lower house prices. Now, here's my comment on this. I don't think the goal here is necessarily to bring down house prices, because here's the problem. So many people have bought homes, or even if you haven't bought a home, you may have refinanced. You bring down house prices too aggressively, you're going to screw the economy in a totally different way, right? A lot of people, right or wrong, their house is their biggest asset, and in some cases, it's their retirement plan. Remember, RSPs haven't been a thing. Probably about the last 30 years they've been a thing. Before that, the baby boomers, all those folks, they were just simply paying down their mortgage as fast as they could, knowing that when it came time to retire, they would sell that asset. So I'm just interested. It's just interesting to see he didn't mention housing would decrease in value, just mortgage costs would come down.
So that helps address the interest cost of the mortgage payment. What about the principal, which is determined by the home price? Canadian prices, which are so much higher than in other countries, are determined by supply and demand. We have the fewest houses per capita in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. We have fewer houses per capita today.
This next stat, man, if you guys are listening and not watching, you got to see this stat. It is insane, okay? And sorry I keep pausing it, but it's pretty important.
Ago, as population has outgrown home building, Canada built fewer homes last year than it built in 1972, 50 years ago. Consider this. In 1972, Canada's population was 22 million, and we built about 230,000 homes. In 2022, Canada's population was 39 million, and we built about 220,000
Holy
homes.
shit. Like, that's insanity. Now, he's going to talk about the reasons for it, which I completely believe. If his suggestion, and I think it is to build more homes, I can tell you right now, we're not going to see a decrease in value of homes. We'll see some isolated issues, but we're not going to see, by and large, huge decreases. We're going to see a maintenance or slight increase because we have such a backlog of people who want to buy a home. And a lot of those renters that are renting right now will probably come out of that market into the buyer's market, plus immigration, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think we're going to see like crazy ass low prices. I think his best solution, and I think that's kind of where he's going with this, see it like we're going to see the same price, if not increase a little bit. Okay. We just can't have every single house in this area in the country drop in price.
In other words, far more people,
Shocker.
far less home building. And the shortfall is only growing. Canada's housing agency, the CMHC, predicts a 32% drop in home building this year, as higher interest rates and red tape are blocking construction. The agency projects that we will be 3.5 million homes short.
Tell me how house prices are going to come down with that. Interest rates, fine, but interest rates are not there just for housing. They're there for everything. Explain to me how house prices are going to come down with that shortfall. If supply and demand drives the market, our supply is a little bit low. Forget interest rates, right? Interest rates are for the whole economy, not just housing.
Based on our current estimates of building and population growth, where will those 3.5 million families live? More importantly, why can't we build homes to house them? What do you think is the most expensive thing that goes into a new house in, say, Vancouver? Is it labor? Lumber? Land? Nope. Government. A CD House study added up all the costs of labor, materials, land, and profit needed to build a home and compared it to the final sale price. In Vancouver, the gap was nearly $1.3 million. That gap, or as I call it, the gatekeeper gap, is the cost of government permit delays, changing rules, pricey consultants, lawyers' fees, charges, taxes, etc. Another study showed Montreal's city government blocked 24,000 homes. The city of Winnipeg, meanwhile, just lost a lawsuit because it tried to block the construction of nearly 2,000 homes right next to a newly built transit system.
This part blows my mind. I don't get this because, yes, we're short housing to buy, but we are crazy short on rental properties, like properties to rent, which again doesn't really support the issue around the high investor, like the number of houses investors bought in the last couple of years, but I digress.
As an example of the mindless red tape costs, the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force report stated that, quote, minimum parking requirements add as much as $165,000 to the cost of a new home, even as demand for parking spaces is falling, and that one of the strongest signs that our approval process is not working, of 35 OECD countries, only the Slovak Republic takes longer than Canada to approve a building project.
Damn, those Slovaks. How are they so slow? Now, I think they're awesome people because I'm glad we're not number one on that list. But if we're slow, like, do they even do permits? Like, it's crazy to hear that stat.
The UK and the US approve projects 3 times faster without sacrificing quality or safety. Government development charges in Ontario can be as much as $135,000 per home, and some have increased as much as 900% in less than 20 years. And those charges don't include governmental costs like taxes.
So again, people who are listening, not watching, he doesn't even mention her name, but he's got a video of Olivia Chow talking at a press conference, and he's talking about red tape and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, it's just like, what's the right term? Not subconsciously, but he's showing a picture of Olivia Chow, mayor of Toronto. and talking about not great things, but not mentioning her name either. I'm like, that's pretty cool. So,
Lays an
oh, and
uncertainty.
then John Tory.
Worst
Anyway,
of all, the Trudeau government has encouraged this gatekeeping with billions of dollars in new grants to the same city governments that block home building. He is literally funding the hiring of more gatekeepers to stand in the way of building homes. So you lose two ways. You pay more in taxes so that you can pay more for a home. So what if we incentivized good behavior rather than reinforcing the bad? Here's how we can. The federal government spends about $4.5 billion on direct and continuous municipal infrastructure transfers. Big city politicians care about getting that money more than anything else. They'll only permit more home building faster if their federal money depends on it. My common sense plan? One.
Okay, this is where it gets a little bit political. I'll let this run. Some really, really good ideas. I don't know how realistic some of them are, but I'll let this run through. Again, this is now where he throws in his 2 cents as to what he wants to do if he's elected prime minister. So let me just run it through.
15% more home building per year as a condition of getting federal infrastructure money. 2, give building bonuses to cities that exceed the 15% target. Dollars should be based on housing completions, not promises. 3, require federally funded transit stations be permitted for high-density apartments all around it, and withhold federal transit grants until the apartments are built and occupied. 4, sell off 15% of federal buildings and thousands of acres of surplus federal land suitable for housing. Instead of funding promises, the federal government should fund results. It should link the number of federal dollars big city governments get for infrastructure to the number of new homes completed. Money should flow after the keys are indoors. Pay for promises, get more promises. Pay for results, get results. The good news is we have examples of success. Look at the Squamish Nation and their development in Vancouver. They've approved and begun building on 6,000 apartments and condos on just 10.4 acres of land. That's nearly 600 homes per acre. Now, they could do this because, being a reserve, they did not need to follow Vancouver City Hall rules. That means 6,000 hardworking local residents will get a place to live because there were no city gatekeepers standing in the way. But let's bring this back. This isn't just about the price of a home. It is not just about numbers. This is people's lives. If we don't fix this, we could have hundreds of thousands of middle-class people living on the street in Canada.
I think, and I'm going to throw out a shout out to Tom and Nick down Rockstar Real Estate. They always talk about this. It's absolutely correct on their podcast. Your Life, Your Terms podcast. Take a listen to it if you get a chance. They always talk about the elimination of the middle class. When we talk about rental properties being bought by like ma and pa setups with 1 or 2 properties, savings going up in smoke, some of the stuff that he was just talking about, that's abolishing the middle class. And that's something I don't like, right? They're always the ones that get taxed the most. They're the ones that get hit with everything. There's something to be said for not screwing with the middle class once in a while, right? I'm not saying screw with the lower class, right? But let's just be a little more realistic. I think the middle class in Canada, pardon me, we're only supposed to have one class, and it's all middle. So where is our middle class, right? Where do we draw the line with it? Because a lot of our middle class families, the ones that have a mortgage, they're trying to get by, stuff like that, they're struggling, right? And it's going to continue if some things don't start to change.
A home is your financial future. A home is the place you're secure. A home is where you raise a family. A home is at the center of everything you do in your life. If the government stands in the way of you getting a home, it stands in the way of your entire life going forward. The good news is, housing costs were not like this before Justin Trudeau, and they won't be like this after he's gone. We can borrow less and build more. We have all the natural advantages: abundant land, labor, and lumber. The best carpenters, plumbers, framers, and electricians and home builders. We just need to get the gatekeepers out of their way and yours so that we can bring it home.
So now this is obviously Pierre Pollevre, bring it home. This is his whole little marketing thing. Anyway, I wanted to go through that video. I'm not trying to say, oh my God, vote for these guys. That's not where I was going. This video is just really good. Like, it's got a lot of detail. Yeah. We got the JT bouncing heads, and, he threw up a picture of Olivia Chow and John Tory, and fine, whatever. But some of the details in here were pretty well presented, right? And that's why I'm like, whoa, that's a good video, right? Anyway, that's where the numbers are. And I think that's where we got to have our minds wrapped around what's happening, right? With numbers and and you can debate it. Not everything in here is it's all factual, but there are some political things in here, but that's the reality. That's where numbers are right now. Okay. Anyway, thanks for coming along this ride. It's been a lot of fun. Sharing a video that has a lot of really good details, a lot of fun to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your comments. This was good, bad, or ugly. If you're listening, make sure you do take a gander at the video, right? I think the updates are up to about the 12, 13 minute mark, and then it flips into the video part. Okay. Anyway, any questions? Love to hear from you. Remember, 5-star review, like me, love me, follow me, desire me, want me, whatever. And until next time, keep fit, have fun. See you soon.